The Runaway King, chapter 38. Most of the pirates kept their seats as they waited to see what Rodin would do next. He chuckled for a moment, as if he was sure I must be joking, and then when he saw I wasn't, he nodded. All right. In a louder voice, he ordered the tables to be moved so that a battle ring could be formed. I kind of need a sword first, I said. People here keep taking mine. Rodin chuckled again as he walked toward me. He gestured to the one I had been using as a crutch. You have one. Yeah, it's made of wood. How am I supposed to stab you? It's not even pointed at the end. Rodin scratched his chin and smiled wickedly. I wouldn't have chosen that one either. But sometimes we have to live with the consequences of our choice. What did you think would happen when you came here? The same thing I think now. Any pirate who doesn't swear loyalty to me is going to die tonight. And you're going to return home with me to Carthia. I studied his reaction carefully to see if my words were having any impact. But I couldn't tell, at least not yet. I want you at my side, Rodin. I need a captain of the guard that I can trust. Along with several of the pirates who had overheard, Rodin laughed out loud at that. You have gone completely mad. Haven't you noticed? I'm your worst enemy. You don't have to be, I said. I'm convinced you'd be a far better friend than an enemy. I just broke your leg, and by the end of this night, I plan to kill you. Well, if you ask nicely, I might let you apologize for that, I said. I gestured around us. This isn't the place for you. It's Carthian blood that runs in your veins. That means nothing. It means we don't have to fight. I lowered my sword to emphasize my point. In fact, I genuinely prefer not to fight. I need you, Rodin. War is coming. He shook his head in disbelief. Yes, I know. I'm bringing you the war. With a grin, I said, well, then you can see my logic for coming here. A pirate approached Rodin. The tables are ready. A space has been cleared for you. Rodin looked over at me. If you back out now, I promise to make your death quick. It's the best I can do. No, the best you can do is to leave this place, I said. Make me. Rodin taunted. As you wish, I said. Planting my good leg as solidly as possible on the ground, I raised my sword again. Your time as a pirate ends tonight. Either you will come with me as my loyal captain of my guard, or I will kill you here. Rodin scoffed. On one leg? Well, it's hard to defeat you unless I use at least one of my legs, I said, smiling. Come with me. Instead, make that choice. Rodin pulled his sword from his scabbard and swung it in a full circle around him. He handled his weapon with an ease that lifelong warriors would envy. I won't give you another choice, Jaren. Unless you surrender now, I will kill you, he said. And the fight began. Walking wasn't an option for me, so I had to use what was available. I nearly fell over in smashing the wooden sword against a large rock on the ground. It splintered just as the other sword had, leaving me with an end much sharper than the point of a blade, even though it was still made of wood and an inferior weapon. Rodin's objective was clearly to knock me off balance, but I ducked most of his harder swings and held steady with only slight help from my injured leg. When he caught on to my strategy, he swung lower, forcing me to block him with the wooden sword near the hilt where it was strongest. Each time he did, though, he had to raise his sword back again, and I used that moment to scratch him with the shards of my broken blade. I never got him deeply, but all of the longer tips had blood on them, so for now, I was keeping up. Rodin, this isn't what you want, I said. I'm a king here, he said. No, you're a lion ruling a nest of maggots here. There's no glory in that, no honor. You're better than this. You're only trying to trick me, Rodin said. You've become so desperate, this is your last offer for your last hope. Well, when I'm desperate, I'll ask Tobias for help. This is no trick. He swung again for my chest. I ducked it, but it cost me my balance. Roden used the chance to push me to the ground. The fall sent tremors of pain through me and gave him time to put a foot on my sword, crushing it. Now you see that move, I said. That was brilliant. You'd be an excellent captain of the guard. He didn't even smile, but instead swung his blade harder at me. I dodged it and then kicked him with my good leg. He stumbled back a step before he raised his sword again. I leaned forward and I grabbed his legs. He tumbled beside me and his blade grazed my shoulder. I reached for the knife from Imogen and stabbed Roden's thigh. He yelped and leapt away. Those leg wounds hurt, don't you think? I said. Roden caught me on the jaw with his fist, but I fell back. I kicked him in the neck, and because I thought his punch was a dirty trick, I kicked him extra hard again. This time, as Roden reacted, his grip on his sword loosened. I dove for it, but he recovered and scooted away, and then he stood up. Get up, he said, heaving gasps of air. This is a sword fight, not a wrestling match. I held up a hand while I caught my own breath. Roden lowered his sword and took my arm, helping me up. Why me? Roden asked. There are others you could choose, men of experience, warriors. Anyone fierce enough to threaten an attack on Carthia is fierce enough to defend it, I said. But how could you ever trust me? Roden asked, after everything between us. Because you could have killed me just now. I locked eyes with him. I know everything about how to make an enemy, but I know very little about a friendship. Still, I think we were friends back at Farthenwood until Cregan poisoned your mind. Cregan only wanted me to become the prince. Yes, but that's the problem. If you accept that you never had a chance to become the prince, never, then you can start to look at everything that you could become. You were always Jaren, Roden mumbled, as if this was the first time that occurred to him. And you are Jaren's friend, I said. I have so few friends, I don't say that lightly. You don't belong here, you never did. Roden looked at me and something changed in his eyes. I wasn't sure what he was thinking, but at least he was listening to me and not trying to stab me. I continued, you want to become someone who matters to this world. If you want to make a difference, then let it be a difference for good. In Carthia, you will stand by my side, and we will fight together, and that matters. Roden faltered a moment, and then he called out, he needs a sword. I can't defeat him honorably unless he's armed. Someone tossed a sword into the ring, far from where I stood. I cocked my head toward it and arched a brow. That doesn't count as my being armed, not if it's over there. Roden groaned. Then he walked to get the sword for me. The instant it was in my hands, he struck me again. With a real sword, I could fight in a more traditional style, minus the obvious complication of a broken leg. I kept my right foot touched to the ground to steady my weight, and I grimaced each time I needed to use it. Roden's hits were harder than mine, but I was faster. Except Roden had figured all that out, and all he had to do was rotate a little, which slowed me down, so that our blades held each other in a sort of dance. In their enthusiasm, the crowd of pirates gradually tightened around us, condensing our circle. This seemed to frustrate Roden, who could have used the space to increase the leverage and strength of his swings. It was an advantage to me, since the less movement I made, the better. My leg screamed in protest of each step, and it was getting harder every second to ignore it. I edged Roden towards the thicker part of the crowd. Because of its size, it was slower to react and had the effect of cornering him until the space gradually widened again. Our blades clashed and parted, and then I raised my sword for an attack. He put his blade in position to stop me and got an inadvertent shove from someone too close behind him. He turned his head very briefly to yell to everyone to get back. I swung my blade onto his hand rather than his sword. He yelped as blood trickled down his arm. He tried to swing again, but with the injury to his hand, his grip failed and he dropped his sword. I grabbed Roden's shirt, using his weight for balance as I pressed my blade to his neck. Let go of your anger, I said to Roden. I became who I was meant to be. You should do the same. You can be so much more than this. The hard expression on Roden's face did not change. I inched the sword away from his neck and added, You are not meant to be a king, but you are meant to lead the king's armies. You are my choice, my guardian, my protector. Roden, I need you as my friend. Something flickered in his eyes again. Roden opened his mouth to say something. Whatever it would have been, he didn't get the chance. I only heard the hard footsteps of a pirate behind me as he jumped into the circle. Before I had the chance to turn to him, he thrust out a foot and kicked me directly on the calf of my wounded leg. I screamed and I fell forward, my entire body consumed in pain. My sword fell flat, far out of my reach, and I landed face first on the ground. All around me, the pirates laughed and congratulated their comrade, but with his sword in his hands, Roden widened the circle and yelled, Stop it! How dare you interfere with my fight? The pirates fell silent. The man who had kicked me snarled, He was about to kill you. Well, if he was, then it was a fair win. I'm not fit to rule anyway if I needed your help to defeat a one-legged opponent. Roden glanced down at me. I'd managed to roll onto one side, but the pain in my leg suffocated me with nausea and dizziness. My vision had blurred so that I couldn't tell for certain whether Roden was standing crookedly or whether the ground where I lay had somehow tilted. Get your sword, Roden said. Get your sword and fight me. My eyes flitted up to him, and then I laid my head back on my arm. There was no point in continuing to fight. Before, I could at least use my broken leg for balance, but I wouldn't even be able to stand now. It was all I could do to remain conscious. Roden walked toward me. Get your weapon, he said. You started this fight, and you're going to finish it. He would finish it. I closed my eyes a moment and then finally made the decision that if I was about to die, I was going to do it with a sword in my hand. Digging my fingers into the dirt, I clawed my way toward the fallen sword. My injured leg dragged uselessly behind me, with my good leg little more helpful in pushing me forward. Roden stood back as I passed him, the point of his sword dangling somewhere above me. I reached the sword by my fingertips, and I inched it into my hand. Using my other hand to prop myself up, I raised the sword and I forced a slight smile to my face. This is your last chance to surrender, I said. My words were barely audible to my own ears, much less his. I guess I have no choice then, Roden said. He raised his sword and I closed my eyes, as prepared as I ever would be for his blade to pierce me and finish off the pain. But he slammed the tip of his sword into the dirt beside me, and he fell on his knees. Obviously, I must surrender, he said, or I'll lose this battle. I opened my eyes and saw Roden's crooked grin as he stared back at me. Then he nudged his head, clearly exasperated that I was slow in catching the meaning of his words. Finally, I held out my sword with no more strength in my hand than I had been a small child, but my voice was as strong as I said, "Swear loyalty to me, Roden, and renounce the pirates." Roden bowed his head and said, "Jaren, you have defeated me in battle. Therefore, I renounce my position and swear loyalty to you as King of Carthia and King of the Avenian pirates, and my king always, wherever in this world you go. When I motioned for him to stand, he turned to the pirates still surrounding us and said, "You heard me. Jaren won this battle, and he commands us now." It was the last thing I heard before I blacked out.